Father Chuck Cimpl has been a leader in our diocese on so many different levels. He has served in every capacity imaginable in diocesan leadership. On every committee, every council, has been Vicar General for the diocese at least twice, I think. He has so many accolades and honors that I'm not going to get into them, except one I want to mention, because I know he's very proud of this and he should be. He was elected to the Bishop O'Gorman Catholic School Hall of Fame 2 years ago? Last year, a year ago. And deservedly so, because he's given his heart and his soul in serving that system. If I may say, from my own personal experience, Father Cimpl has been a mentor to me and to so many other priests in our diocese. Many of our priests will tell you if they need advice or direction, they go to Father Chuck. He has a great love for young people, a great love for students. He was the director of the Newman Center at South Dakota State University for 4 years, chaplain for the Jackrabbit football team. So he has the experience of a Newman chaplain and knows the heavy load that Father Rutten carries as your own Newman chaplain. Though Father Chuck went to the dark side, north of us, on the other side of Sioux Falls, in no man's land, the good news is that his sister and various relatives saw the light and were educated here on the good side in Kyle country. He had the privilege, though, of serving under one of USD's greats, Msgr. James Michael Doyle, who was the chaplain here when I was a student in the late 70s, early 80s. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I want to present to you our main speaker, Father Chuck Cimpl.
I really think John Rutten gave the keynote address. You know, when I got here this afternoon at 5 o'clock, I got this little slip. It says, Father Cimpl, please speak at 7:45. You can tell how Rutten is on time. I don't know how his sermons are at USD, but if they're like that, wow, you're probably there till, if it starts at 11, if you're out by 2, good luck. You know, Trevor quoted St. Thomas More. I'm going to quote the other person that put him to death, King Henry VIII, who said to his wives, I won't keep you long. All right. You know, those of you married, some of you married probably some years, 60 years. I looked up with the 60th anniversary, which you're supposed to give to your significant other on your 60th anniversary, is diamonds. And the reason is it's a sign of strength, brilliance, and enduring nature. And I think all those fit into what USD Newman Center have been throughout the years. When Father Rutten asked me to come up and speak, it was about what happened early on here at the Newman Center when it first began. As we heard, there was a club, and then the first priests that were actually assigned, Father Flannery, who was one of what many of us that knew Flan as priests. When I was a younger priest, got to know him. He was a great guy. He was what we call a priest. He had a lot of us together for various things. A natural to be assigned to USD at the Newman Center. At that time, Jim Doyle was the pastor in Centerville. He came from Mitchell, where he was an associate with Jerry Holtzman. Many of you know Father Holtzman, who was in Vermilion at St. Agnes, and also Monsignor Mahold. They were together in Mitchell with Monsignor John Brady. Then Jim Doyle went to Centerville, built the church there, and then helped out Flan here at the Newman Center, and then became director of the Newman Center in that, as many of us that were alive at that time, 1968. Talk about we have turmoil now. Imagine 1968 going on with the Vietnam War, assassinations, all sorts of things happening, and Jim Doyle came here to USD to be the chaplain of the Newman Center. My association with Jim Doyle goes way back to when I was just a grade school kid. I don't know how many of you know a little history of our diocese. We had Father Cronin in Tyndall, where Joe Purcell has been pastor. Father Cronin was one of the great priests in Tyndall at St. Leo's there. And he had an associate, Bob Flannery. In Mitchell with John Brady, as I said, was Jim Doyle. And in Tabor, where I grew up, we had Benedictine priests, Father Ray Kuhlman from right outside of Chicago. Because we were a Czechoslovakian community, we had a Czech priest, but they loved to party, much like the priests do today, and they had parties. My dad, being a butcher, he would come, and Father Coleman would have Father Cronin, Flan, Jim Doyle over at the rectory, and I had to help clear the dishes. So that's where I first met Jim Doyle and Flan as a grade school kid. When I was going to high school, my parents, of course, we had a grade school that was Catholic in Tabor, but not a high school, ended up going to Mitchell, Notre Dame. Closed. I was the last class that graduated from there in 1970. They said when I graduated, it reached its peak and they closed the school. So, because they didn't have places to live, I was needed a house. And Jim Doyle put a little ad in the parish bulletin at Holy Family saying we have this renegade kid that wants to come to Notre Dame and needs a place to stay. And that's how I found a place to stay for 4 years in Mitchell, living with a lovely lady and her 4 kids, and went to school there. And then Jim Doyle, during that time, was assigned to USD. Our paths kind of then didn't meet till 1979. Actually, when he left USD and became the pastor of St. Michael's Parish in Sioux Falls. I was ordained in 78, and then because he was starting the parish, he met at O'Gorman High School. And I was living at O'Gorman High School, and so I helped him out on weekends. We became associate. I became his associate, and the rest is history. But what I want to talk about just for a few minutes is what really this place meant to Jim Doyle. You know, as a priest, as John already said, it's not coincidence. It's where we're placed at a given time. And Jim was placed here at the very appropriate time. There are so many people, at his funeral, Tom Fritz spoke on behalf of so many people, and Tom mentioned the great influence that Jim had in those tumultuous times when a lot of kids were wondering where the church was even at and what's going on, and the way he kept people into their association with the faith. And it was here, a lot of times when Jim and I would talk, he would reflect back, especially on days that weren't going so well, of the great time. He used to call this his Camelot years at USD, because it was such an important part of his life. And so many associations in Sioux Falls and around the diocese. And those of you who know Jim, he could remember names incredibly. Not only your name, but he'd remember your grandparents' name. We'd go into a restaurant and try to eat. I would be having my dessert before he sat down, because he would be meeting with everybody at the table, at other tables, and all of them were associated with USD. His proudest moments, and he would speak about them occasionally. You know, it was odd at that time, and unlike, Newman centers were set up, of course, by Cardinal Newman in Oxford in the 19th century to build community, to also be an intellectual place, and you heard of some of the great speakers he used to bring in, and so many people that he would have, and on various ways of the issues, not just one side of it. And at that time, there could be rather healthy dialogue without getting into fights or violence. It was really kind of a healthy place where campuses could debate. And he would bring in people from both sides that would have lectures, discussions, and many times that were just very influential in the way people would then understand their faith and also the society they were living in, and also the spiritual part of it. You know, he loved, as you know, the liturgy and drawing people together, and of course, the ways that he would, just the way he could coin a phrase, give a homily, it was always so impressive. I think too, though, and he used to tell me this, and he had lots of awards, Hall of Fame in South Dakota, all kinds of things. He said the thing that he always at least cherished the most was 2 times he was named here as a faculty member as the outstanding teacher of the year. And as a priest, he knew so many people because of his teaching scripture and Eastern religions. And so he was so influential on the campus. And then they gave him an honorary doctorate when I think Jim Abbott was the president at that time. So it really was a very important part of his life and ministry. I don't know how many of you have a copy or have received copies of Jim's book that he authored, quite a few years ago. And it's a wonderful book. And chapter in there is on the Newman Center. But I think Tom quoted this at Jim's funeral. And here's just a little part of the book. And probably John Rutten is like this too. So on Parents' Weekend, approached one year, I put a picture in the campus newspaper with me standing in front of the Newman Center and holding a sign that read, "Bring your parents to Mass this Sunday, and I will pretend I know you." The very next day, now this is what's clever around Vermilion here, the very next day, there was a sign in the front window of the Charcoal Lounge, a favorite watering hole for students, which read, "Bring your parents here after Sunday Mass for our delicious brunch, and we'll pretend we never knew you." So, that was the kind of things that Jim was so good at, of coining a phrase, of advertising the Newman Center and getting people involved in it, much like you see happening today. He would be honored to see what's happening now, and as John said, continues to happen in the years to come. When Jim's memory started to go, and he only had one sibling, a sister, Sister Margaretta Doyle, who died before him, a Benedictine sister, with Sister Rosemary, so it was the same order as Benedictines in Yankton. His memory started to go, and he was in a memory unit, thanks to Dave Landry here, who's been with Dave and I worked with Jim for the last few years. We're not that easy at times. His memory was fading, and I went up. He was at this place, what's called Grand Living. It's under a new name now, close to St. Michael's, where he founded, which we thought would kind of spur some things in his memory. Well, it was going to the point where he wouldn't remember a lot, and I was coming out of the elevator one day, and this woman that had her husband in there at the same unit, and she had an album with pictures. And I said, "What's that?" She said, "You know what? I found if I bring pictures in, my husband kind of gets back to his memory." So I had a lot of Jim's stuff, and I found albums of USD when he was at the Newman Center. And I started bringing those in. I'd take a page out, and I'd put it on the chair when we were talking, and he could remember every name of every student on that sheet from 1968 to 1979. It amazed me. All the other stuff, in fact, I would be in the elevator, somebody would be coming down that visited him, and I would kind of check his memory. I said, "Jim, do you have any visitors today?" "No, nobody sees me." Well, I knew somebody had just been there, but that was the present thing was not there. But 1968 to 1979 were just indelibly marked in Jim's brain. It really was his Camelot years. And I knew that the influence he had here in the Newman Center for so many years has spurred it on at the beginnings with Flan to make it what it is today, and as John says, keeps going on. So we were dear friends. I kind of, ended up with him from 1979, after first being ordained, when he started St. Michael's. We did go to Brookings together. He was never really a jackrabbit. It was tough for him, but he was in Brookings, and he did try to get along with some people there, and actually became good friends with many. But his love was always here, deep red coyote blood in him, and that was certainly true. And then, of course, we were together back in Sioux Falls, and then, of course, at the time of his death, since he had just a sister who was religious, and him a priest, no nephews, no nieces, so I became kind of the guy that kept living his things with the help of many good friends, and really was really a cherished part of my priesthood to be part of his life for so many years. So, my thanks to all of you from USD. Actually, some of you, Kevin and Shannon Miles are here. Jim Englert was a classmate of mine. He's a classmate of mine. Jim's still alive, of course. He's living in Rochester. We see each other. We're great, dear friends. We were in seminary together for 8 years. Jim is a mind of minds. I mean, I still hear people in Sioux Falls, for instance, like Justice Salter. Mark Salter, who was at USD, was also at SDSU, but then came to USD for law school. He says that some of the greatest homilies he's ever heard were from Jim Englert. And I know I hear that from other people in Sioux Falls that were here when Jim was here with Kevin and Shannon and his sister. And, Jim and I were assigned to the Newman Centers on the same time. I was assigned to SDSU. He was assigned to USD. We were both living in the same place at that time. He was running the Marriage Tribunal. I was teaching at O'Gorman. And we both got the assignment. We were sitting at lunch one day, and only an English dial. He said, I'm going to USD, you're going to SDSU, we're going to kick your ass. Well, I don't know what happened, but I think whatever. I know that he had a great time here, and the other priests did too that we already heard. But I think of all the priests that probably were most influential in many ways and were most influenced by when they were here was James Michael Doyle. He was truly a yote and truly what he believed to be the greatest part of his ministry, being part of the Newman Center at USD. Thank you all. It's been great to be with you, and I know that Jim would be looking on from heavens, thanking you for all you do to the Newman Center. God bless.